All right, let me show some examples for this project. One of the handouts that should be available is this one that has design principles that shows some very basic examples of balance, repetition, emphasis, hierarchy, contrast, unity. And these are just 6 examples. There are many others that you can start to use as a way of start to organizing your projects, your ideas. But just to show you a few, this is one that uses contrast and unity. Here, let me turn on the layer or the guides. You can see how they set up their guides, and then once they had them set up, they started to work within their guides. This one, the color palette works really well. The reason why they chose this was they were specifically in the quote or song poem that they were using. They specifically mentioned a forest, so they used like a greenish brownish color tone. In the second example, they used hierarchy, balance, and repetition. The repetition of of the pieces climbing up. There's the balance; it's almost balanced by being symmetrical, as well as the hierarchy of the pieces getting larger as it starts to climb up. And again, if you look at their grid layout system or their guides, they just have like an overall guide setup, or the overall guides, but then on the bottom one you can see they use two-step or two guidelines worth, and then they took a space, and then there's 3, and then a space, and then 4 space, and then 5. So it's just a very clever way of setting that up with using hierarchy. The third example, there's a lot going on in this one. There's a lot of pieces. The interesting part is the way they set up their guides. They actually left their initial setup of their guides up here at the top and on the side. But when you turn on their guides, you can see how they used a pattern where they have one guide and then they skip 2, and then they have the 2 guides set up and then they skip 2, and then they have the spacing and then skip 2, as well as on the side. They have their first guides set up, and then they skip 3, and then they have like their spacing, and then they skip 3 guides, and then their spacing, skip 3, and then their spacing. So you can see how that starts to work out on the inside. And then they just start to play with the way the project looks on the inside. And this one deals with repetition and hierarchy. Repetition by it's kind of like a broken repetition. You see you have like 3 pieces at the bottom, and then you have 3 pieces at the top, and then here you have 4 pieces with right above it there's 1, and then like the larger one, and then here it's actually flipped. There's the 4, and then there's the 1 with the larger one. So it's playing with the idea of repetition, or and the way they deal with hierarchy is they deal with it with color. So as the colors towards the bottom are darker, and then it starts to get lighter, and then at the top it gets the lightest colors. Here's another version. Let me show you the guides, the way they set this up really quick. They actually use two different guides. The horizontal guides, you can see there's just a very basic pattern that's set up, and then with the other guides, with the vertical guides, they had a very basic pattern. On the horizontal guides, they have a much larger space, and then there's the gap, and then a larger space, and then a gap. The gap, I want to say, is the same distance as the spacing here. And they dealt with balance, unity, and repetition. So like there's the balance between the 2 pieces up at the top and the bottom, and the unity, and the repetition is actually kind of hidden, which is really nice. It's hidden within their guides. So it's the repetition of like the larger gap, the larger spacing, and then the regular spacing, and then larger spacing, regular spacing, larger spacing, regular spacing. So it was dealing with repetition, but it's actually in the way that the the guides are being set up. And then for the last one, this one is working with emphasis and contrast. So an emphasis where this is the main part that your eye is drawn to, and then there's the contrast with the colors, where again these are like the darker colors, and then the contrast of the lighter colors, and they were really smart in the way they set this up, where they had their letters large enough where they start to overlap. So because of the white background and the white letters, you can put this back in place. It starts to see like they just have like a regular square or rectangle in the background, but because of the letters, they kind of overlapping, it kind of blends a little bit more. And they did the same thing here. Let me turn off their text. That instead of making a very specific shape, they just used a white box to overlap this. So it makes it look like it's carved out, but really it's just on its own layer. So the way they set this up is actually a really smart way of doing this. And and the way they set up their guides is pretty simple, straightforward. The way they set up their guides, but again, like everything was working within the system that they set up, but just a very clever way of setting it up. But hopefully this helps with showing some different examples.